The steady, thrumming hum of the Vorash warship relentless intent resonated through its cold metal corridors, an almost mocking reminder of the vessel's relentless, exhausting march through deep space. Inside the command center, the air crackled with tension. Commander Tyral's cyan blue scales rippled reflexively as he listened to grim reports from his officers. Supplies were dangerously low, morale teetered on the edge of collapse, and the Cruxus Syndicate's relentless onslaught showed no signs of waning. Every Vorash in the room knew desperation was setting in. Ambassador Rika, an elder statesman with shimmering, weathered iridescent markings, stood at Tyral's side, silent and resolute. He had served through countless campaigns, seen the rise and fall of alliances, and worn every victory and defeat like a badge of honor. "Commander," he began, voice calm but firm, "we need an unconventional solution. We need allies who think differently." Tyral's tail flicked in agitation. "An unconventional solution? You refer to this human you insisted on bringing aboard? A fragile species known for their short tempers and shorter attention spans." His voice dripped with disdain, but it was a thin veil for his exhaustion. Rika's expression shifted into a faint, knowing smile. "This particular human, Captain Mason Hill, is known for turning hopeless situations into opportunities. I believe you'll find his methods interesting." Before Tyral could respond, the bay doors hissed open. All eyes turned as Captain Mason Hill strode into the room. Tall and lean, with short, wind-tousled brown hair, Hill carried himself with a confident, unflappable air. His Alliance uniform, worn but clean, bore patches and hastily repaired seams, a testament to battles hard fought and narrowly survived. In one hand, he carried a battered crate labeled Alliance Emergency Rations. He might as well have walked into a council of war with a toy box. "Commander Tyral," Ambassador Rika Hill greeted, his voice warm but businesslike. He set the crate down with a thud. "I hear you're in a tight spot." Tyral's scales shifted to a deep, stormy blue, signaling both irritation and incredulity. "A tight spot?" "Our fleet is on the brink of ruin, Captain. Resources are scarce, soldiers are collapsing from exhaustion, and the Cruxes are at our throats." He gestured dismissively at the crate. "And you bring provisions." Hill's lips quirked in a half-smile. "Not just any provisions, Commander. Emergency rations." He flipped open the crate, revealing rows of foil-wrapped bars, powdered drink packets, and vacuum-sealed pouches. Each pack is a compact miracle, high-calorie, nutrient-dense, easy to consume under extreme conditions. Think of it as fuel for the fight. There was a long, heavy pause. Tyral stepped forward, his clawed feet clanging against the metal floor. He picked up one of the silver packets and examined it like it might explode. "Battle fuel? We are warriors, human. We do not need snacks." "Ah," Hill said, nodding sagely. "You misunderstand." He grabbed another packet, tore it open, and gestured for Tyral to follow suit. "Humor me, Commander." The entire room watched, holding its collective breath. Tyral reluctantly tore open the wrapper and bit into the bar. A dozen sensations hit him at once, most of them unpleasant. The taste was something between charred sawdust and synthetic berries, with a texture like compressed rock dust. He swallowed with difficulty, his eyes narrowing. "This is revolting." Hill's grin widened. "Yeah, it's bad. But you'll notice it works." He tapped his temple. "Within moments, your energy levels will stabilize. Enhanced focus. Reduced fatigue. Taste wasn't the priority." Tyral's first instinct was to hurl the offending bar across the room, but a flicker of sensation stopped him. It was subtle at first, a warm surge, like embers in a dying fire. Despite the taste, he felt the weight of fatigue lift ever so slightly. His mind sharpened. He hated that it was working. Before Tyral could respond, the ship's klaxon blared. Lights flashed, and a harsh mechanical voice announced, "Crux's strike force inbound. All hands to battle stations." Chaos erupted as officers scrambled to their posts. Tyral dropped the wrapper and whirled on Hill, his voice hard. "Stay out of the way, human. We do not need distractions." Hill bent down, picked up his crate of rations, and offered a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'll be around." The command center became a whirlwind of activity. Tactical displays flickered to life, projecting the incoming Cruxus assault fleet, a wall of black and crimson ships bristling with weaponry. Tyral barked orders, his movements precise and commanding. "Shields to maximum. Prepare to engage." The Vorash vessels moved to intercept, unleashing a torrent of energy bolts that lit up the void. Crux's ships responded with blinding plasma fire, turning the battlefield into a chaotic web of destruction. Through it all, Hill stood to the side, eyes scanning every movement. Commander Ambassador Rika said, his voice low but insistent, "Our people are exhausted. If the humans' methods can provide even a temporary edge, perhaps we should consider it." Tyral gritted his teeth as the ship shook from another hit. "You would have us place our fate in the hands of a human and his snacks." "Desperate times," Rika replied. Tyral glanced at Hill, who met his gaze without flinching. "You want to help," human Tyral growled. "Prove it." Hill nodded, his expression turning serious. He opened the crate and began distributing rations to the bridge crew, offering words of encouragement as he moved. Confusion flickered across reptilian faces, but one by one, they consumed the energy bars. Minutes passed, marked by relentless exchanges of fire with the Cruxes. To Tyral's surprise, he felt a surge of energy, not the frenzied rush of adrenaline, but a steady, focused drive. The same was true for his crew. Officers who had been on the brink of collapse now worked with renewed vigor, coordinating complex maneuvers, analyzing enemy patterns, and adapting on the fly. The battle dragged on, brutal and unyielding. The Cruxes pressed hard, but the Vorash met them blow for blow. Hill moved among them, not as an observer, but as an ally, issuing rations, offering support, and keeping spirits high. The human was a peculiar sight, a battlefield medic armed with nutritional bars instead of bandages, but he made a difference. When the tide finally turned and the Cruxes retreated, Tyral slumped into his chair, exhaustion overtaking him. This should not have worked. Hill, sweat-drenched and breathing hard, leaned against an empty crate. "Desperation makes for good allies, Commander. So does decent nutrition," he offered a weary grin. "Consider this a starting point." Tyral's gaze was hard, but there was a glimmer of something else, perhaps respect, or at least acknowledgement. The humans' rations, absurd as it seemed, had helped them survive. For now, it was enough. The relentless intent drifted through the debris-littered void, its hull scorched and battered. Smoke lingered in the corridors as exhausted Vorash crew members worked tirelessly to repair damage and tend to the wounded. Victory was theirs, but it had come at a cost. Every victory did. Commander Tyral stood at the bridge's observation window, gazing out at the shattered remains of Crux's vessels that now drifted aimlessly. His cyan blue scales had faded to a muted, tired hue, reflecting the toll of the prolonged conflict. He loathed the thought of relying on outsiders, especially a human, but there was no denying the impact Captain Mason Hill had made. "Penny for your thoughts," the voice was casual but cut through the silence. Hill approached, his Alliance uniform a little worse for wear, but his stride as confident as ever. He carried another crate marked emergency nutrient packs. Tyral glanced at him without turning away from the viewport. "That phrase means nothing to me," human Tyral replied coolly, though his tail flicked in mild curiosity. "But if you seek praise, you won't find it here." "Didn't come looking for that." Hill set the crate down and leaned against it. "I came to talk about morale. Your crew is hurting, exhausted. That last battle pushed everyone past their limits." Tyral's scales darkened. "You think I don't know that?" Hill didn't flinch at the commander's harsh tone. "I know you do. That's why we need more than just rations to keep everyone going." Tyral turned, his eyes narrowing. "You would have us fight a war with food and morale tricks." Not tricks. Hill opened the crate, revealing an assortment of powders, pouches, and energy gels alongside the familiar nutrient bars. "Upgrades. I'm talking instant soups, electrolyte-enhanced drinks, energy gels designed for rapid recovery. I've already tested them myself. You want warriors who can fight at their best? They need more than raw determination. They need sustenance that keeps their minds sharp and their bodies going." Tyral folded his arms, suspicion evident in every line of his posture. "You make it sound so simple." "It isn't," Hill admitted, his voice lowering. "Back where I'm from, you don't win by brute strength alone. You win because you outlast the enemy. Because when they think you're down, you get back up again and again. The rations are just a piece of that." A moment of silence stretched between them. Then, reluctantly, Tyral nodded. Show me. In the ship's mess hall, Hill worked quickly to set up a makeshift station, drawing the attention of curious Vorash soldiers. Hill's actions were a curious mix of practicality and showmanship. He blended powders into steaming mugs of instant broth, stirred electrolyte gels into hydration packs, and tossed nutrient bars with practiced precision. A young Vorash soldier named Renka, who had barely survived the last battle, eyed a steaming cup of broth with a mix of curiosity and doubt. "What is this, human?" "Chicken-flavored broth," Hill said, as if that explained everything. "Helps with hydration, salts, and electrolytes. Drink it, you'll feel better." Renka sniffed the cup suspiciously before taking a tentative sip. His eyes widened. "This is strangely comforting." See, Hill grinned, moving to the next group of soldiers. "Works every time." Commander Tyral entered the mess hall, his gaze sweeping over the scene. His warriors battle-hardened and weary were eating, drinking, even laughing. It was surreal. He approached Hill, his voice low. "This changes nothing, human. One moment of respite does not win a war." Hill's smile faded, and he met Tyral's gaze with quiet intensity. "No, it doesn't. But it gives your people the strength to keep fighting. That's worth something." Before Tyral could respond, a messenger arrived, his expression grim. "Commander, Ambassador Rika has called an emergency council. Intelligence reports indicate Crux's forces are massing near the Voran cluster." Tyral's jaw clenched. "We barely survived the last engagement. If they attack now..." Hill stepped forward, determination hardening his features. "Then we don't let them. We hit first. Hard." Tyral's scales shifted with tension. "We have neither the strength nor the resources." Hill's eyes gleamed with something between defiance and inspiration. "Then we make them fight on our terms. We use their predictability against them. I have a plan." The War Council convened in a dimly lit chamber, holographic displays casting a ghostly glow across the gathered Vorash leaders. Ambassador Rika, ever the calm presence, listened as Hill outlined his idea. The human captain's voice was steady, but every word was laced with urgency. "The Cruxes thrive on intimidation and brute force. They expect us to cower, to defend what's left. But what if we turn their strength into weakness?" Hill pointed to a cluster of Cruxes occupied systems on the star map. "We target their supply lines. Infiltration teams hit key installations, disrupt their logistics, and sow confusion." A senior officer, his scales flashing with skepticism, leaned forward. "How?" "The Cruxes guard their supplies ruthlessly. Any infiltration would be suicide." "Not if we blend in," Hill countered, producing a small vial of shimmering liquid, adaptation gel, originally used by humans to survive hostile environments. With some modifications, it temporarily alters appearance and masks biological signatures. We can pass as Cruxes long enough to do serious damage. The room erupted into murmurs of disbelief. Tyral raised a clawed hand, silencing them. "You would have us disguise ourselves as our enemies and infiltrate their most heavily guarded outposts? This is madness." Hill's voice was soft but unyielding. "Madness is sitting here, waiting to be crushed. We take the fight to them on our terms." The council fell into tense silence. Then, slowly, Rika spoke. "The risk is great, but so is the reward. Commander, I support this plan." Tyral studied Hill for a long moment, weighing the impossible choice. Finally, he nodded. "We will proceed. But understand this, human, if you lead my warriors into death, I will hold you accountable." Hill nodded solemnly. "Understood." Preparations for the infiltration mission moved quickly. The adaptation gel was tested and modified to account for Vorash physiology. Volunteers were chosen, brave souls who knew the risks and accepted them willingly. Among them was Tyral himself, to the surprise of many. "If we die together," he told his soldiers. "But if we succeed, we may change the course of this war." On the eve of the mission, Hill gathered the team in a quiet chamber. He held up a vial of the shimmering gel. "This is it. Once you drink it, there's no turning back. You'll be Cruxes in every way that matters, at least for a while. But I promise you we'll get out." Tyral took the vial, his gaze steely. "We will see, human." They drank. Pain erupted, every cell in their bodies screaming as the transformation took hold. Scales shifted, skin rippled, and features reshaped. When the agony subsided, they stood as crooks as a perfect disguise. Hill looked at his altered hands and forced a wry smile. "I've looked better." Renka, his voice now a low, guttural approximation of Crux's speech, let out a shaky laugh. "We all have." They boarded a stolen Crux's transport and set off for their target, a supply depot deep in enemy territory. Every step was a gamble, every breath a risk. As they neared the outpost, Hill's voice crackled over the comms. "Remember, get in, sabotage everything, and get out. Stay sharp." The transport touched down. The fate of the mission and possibly the war rested on their shoulders. The Crux's supply outpost loomed large as the Vorash infiltration team, disguised as their enemy, descended the ramp of their stolen transport. A mix of metallic architecture and jagged rock formations framed the base, a fortress pulsing with activity. Patrols of Crux's guards, their armor a dark crimson, moved with precision. The air was heavy with the scent of burnt metal and the thrum of distant machinery. Captain Mason Hill, now unrecognizable as a Crux's warrior thanks to the adaptation gel, adjusted his stolen uniform and motioned for his team to follow. Commander Tyral, his own altered features betraying nothing of the Vorash within, flanked him with a silent, watchful intensity. Around them, Vorash soldiers in their Crux's disguises moved with calculated confidence, every step a test of nerve. "Remember the plan," Hill murmured through the comm link embedded in their armor. "Plant the charges, contaminate their supplies, and get out. Quick and quiet." Tyral's reply was low and terse. "Do not assume we need reminders, human." Hill suppressed a smile. Even now, in the heart of enemy territory, Tyral's pride was unshakable. But there was a hint of tension in the commander's voice, a reminder that one slip could cost them everything. The team split into smaller groups, each with a task critical to the mission's success. Hill led his unit through the labyrinthine corridors of the supply depot, passing Crux's workers who barely spared them a glance. The disguise was working for now. Every breath felt like a tightrope walk over a pit of plasma fire. They reached the main storage chamber, a cavernous space lined with crates of weapons, energy cells, and food reserves. Hill's eyes scanned the room, noting key targets. "Renka, you're on food contamination duty," he said quietly. "Tyral, take your group and rig the fuel lines. We set the charges and leave on my signal." Renka, who had been fidgeting with his weapon, nodded and moved off, a determined glint in his eyes. Tyral's gaze met Hill's for a brief moment, a silent acknowledgement of trust and necessity, before he and his unit slipped into the shadows. Hill moved to the first storage tank, his hands steady as he worked. He poured packets of stimulant-laden powder into the Crux's food stores, knowing that even a small dose would disrupt their physiology, causing confusion, exhaustion, and erratic behavior. It was a strange irony, using emergency rations as a weapon of war, but Hill had long since stopped questioning absurdity when it worked. "Almost done," Renka whispered as he finished emptying a pouch into a water tank. His eyes darted nervously. "Do you think they'll notice?" Hill placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Not until it's too late." But fate had a cruel sense of timing. The chamber doors slid open, and a Crux's officer entered, flanked by two guards. His yellow eyes narrowed as he surveyed the room, his gaze landing on Hill and Renka. "Are you there? What is your designation?" Hill's heart pounded. He forced himself to mimic the guttural tones of Crux's speech. "Routine inspection, sir." The officer's nostrils flared and he stepped closer. "Inspection?" "I wasn't informed." His eyes flicked to the equipment in Hill's hands. "What exactly are you inspecting?" Renka's grip tightened on his weapon. Hill moved subtly, shifting his body to shield the younger soldier. "Supply integrity," he said, each word deliberate. "Orders from command." The officer sneered. "Command doesn't trust its own warriors now? Perhaps you'd like to explain this to central authority." Hill's mind raced. They were seconds away from exposure. He caught a glimpse of Tyral in the shadows, his posture coiled like a predator ready to strike. Time slowed. Then, with the fluidity of desperation, Hill acted. He lunged forward, striking the officer in the throat. The blow was precise enough to silence but not kill. Chaos erupted. The guards drew their weapons, but Tyral was faster. He and his unit surged from the shadows, cutting them down before alarms could be triggered. Hill's chest heaved as he checked the unconscious officer. "No time," he said, voice tight. "Plant the charges and move." Explosions rocked the base moments later as fuel lines ignited. Fire and chaos consumed the depot, sending Crux's personnel scrambling. Hill's team wove through the confusion, dodging debris and plasma fire. The air was thick with heat and smoke, every step a battle to stay ahead of the flames. They reached the transport bay, just as Crux's reinforcements poured in. Plasma bolts scorched the ground, and the scent of ozone filled the air. Hill barked orders, covering his team's retreat with suppressing fire. "Move, move." Renka stumbled, a plasma bolt grazing his shoulder. He cried out, and Hill grabbed him, dragging him toward the waiting transport. "Stay with me," Kid Hill grunted, his grip firm. "You're not done yet." Tyral was the last to board, his face a mask of exhaustion and fury. "Launch now," he roared at the pilot. The ship's engines roared to life, and they shot into the sky, narrowly avoiding a barrage of enemy fire. The Crux's base shrank behind them, a smoldering ruin. Hours later, back aboard the relentless Intent, the team gathered in the medical bay. The adaptation gel's effects had worn off, leaving them battered but themselves again. Renka's arm was bandaged, and he sat quietly, processing the close call. Tyral stood nearby, watching as medics treated his soldiers. His gaze was unreadable. Hill approached, fatigue etched into every line of his face. "We did it," he said quietly. Tyral's eyes met his. For a moment, the tension between them evaporated. "Yes, we did," his voice softened, but only slightly. "You have a way of turning desperation into opportunity, human. I do not fully understand it, but it works." Hill managed a weary smile. "It's a human specialty." Tyral's expression grew serious again. "The Cruxes will respond with fury. This victory buys you us time, but they will come for us." "I know," Hill said, "which means we need to be ready." The Cruxes did not wait long to strike back. Their attacks became erratic, fueled by anger and desperation. But Hill and the Vorash had anticipated this. They turned every battle into an exercise in adaptability, using every trick and tactic at their disposal. Emergency rations became more than just food, they were symbols of resilience and defiance, a reminder that even the smallest advantage could tip the scales. One evening, as Hill stood on the observation deck, Tyral joined him. They watched the stars in silence for a long time. "You have changed us," Captain Hill Tyral said at last. "We were warriors, but you have shown us how to be more." Hill nodded, his eyes distant. "And you've shown me what it means to fight for more than survival, for something worth saving." Together they prepared for the next stage of the war, knowing that their fight was far from over, but believing, for the first time, that victory was possible. The Vorash and their human ally, Captain Mason Hill, prepared for what would be the decisive battle in their long and bloody conflict with the Cruxes Syndicate. The Cruxes had retreated to their fortress world, a heavily defended stronghold surrounded by layers of orbital defenses and guarded by the remnants of their battered fleet. For the Vorash, it was clear either they broke the Cruxes here or they risked annihilation as the enemy regrouped and retaliated with renewed fury. On board the relentless Intent, the air was thick with tension and determination. Commander Tyral stood at the center of the War Council chamber, his cyan blue scales shimmering with steely resolve. Around him were the highest-ranking Vorash officers, Ambassador Rika and Captain Hill. A holographic projection of the Cruxes' fortress world floated above them, displaying the enemy fleet, weapon emplacements, and key strategic targets. "This is their heart," Tyral said, his voice low but resonant. "Break it, and we end this war. But it will not be easy. The Cruxes know we are coming. Their defenses are formidable." Hill stepped forward, the lines of fatigue on his face doing nothing to diminish the fire in his eyes. "Formidable, yes, but not invincible. They're expecting a straightforward assault. We give them something else." Ambassador Rika inclined his head, a flicker of hope crossing his iridescent markings. "You have a plan, Captain Hill." Hill nodded. We take everything we've learned, the rations, the tactics, the disguises, and use them in one final push. We make it chaotic, unpredictable. We make them fight on our terms. Tyral's gaze was wary. Another infiltration? That approach is fraught with risk. Not infiltration this time, Hill said. We hit them with the three-pronged assault. The fleet draws their attention with a feint, forcing their defenses to focus on our main ships. Meanwhile, a ground team including me will land and sabotage their key systems. And then we unleash the real surprise. The real surprise? Tyral asked, skeptical. Hill's grin was equal parts exhaustion and determination. Weaponized emergency rations, modified to disrupt their physiology on a massive scale. We drop the payload across their lines, turning their greatest strength, their numbers, into chaos. The room fell silent as the Vorash officers absorbed the audacity of the plan. It was a gamble, bold, dangerous, and deeply unorthodox. But it was exactly the kind of madness that had brought them this far. Tyral stepped forward, his scales darkening with a mix of apprehension and resolve. If we do this, there is no turning back. There never was, Hill replied quietly. The Vorash fleet emerged from hyperspace with the force of a storm, bearing down on the Crux's defenses. Plasma beams and energy blasts illuminated the void, turning space into a deadly light show. The relentless intent led the charge, its weapons firing relentlessly. Crux's ships responded in kind, forming a defensive wall that bristled with firepower. On board the lead transport ship, Hill and Tyral prepared for their ground assault. Each soldier carried modified emergency rations, now packed with concentrated stimulants and compounds designed to disrupt Crux's biology. It was a strange, ironic weapon, simple but potentially devastating. Hill glanced at Tyral as they readied their gear. This is it, Commander. Tyral's expression was hard, but there was a spark of something: trust, perhaps, or respect. Do not die before I have a chance to properly criticize your methods, human. Hill chuckled, despite the tension. I'll do my best. Their transport broke through the atmosphere, weaving through anti-air fire. The ground erupted around them as they landed, soldiers pouring out to meet the Crux's defenders. The air was thick with smoke and the crackle of energy weapons. Move fast, Hill shouted over the comms. Distribute the rations and fall back. The ground team split into smaller units, each tasked with planting the modified rations throughout Crux's strongholds and supply depots. The Cruxes, unaware of the true threat, focused their efforts on conventional combat, pressing their numerical advantage. Hill and his unit pushed forward, every step a battle. Deep within the enemy stronghold, Hill and Tyral fought side by side. Plasma bolts seared the air, and the clash of metal rang out. A Crux's warlord charged, a massive figure with eyes burning with hatred. Tyral met him head-on, their blades locking in a shower of sparks. Go, Tyral barked, straining against the warlord's strength. Finish the mission. Hill hesitated for a fraction of a second, torn between helping his ally and completing the mission. Then he turned and ran, his heart pounding. The final cache of rations needed to be deployed. He reached the central supply hub, a cavernous chamber filled with Crux's war supplies. Hill moved quickly, placing the modified packs around the room. He activated the dispersal mechanism, watching as a fine mist began to spread, carried by the ventilation system. The stimulant compounds would soon flood the base, throwing the Cruxes into disarray. Captain Renka's voice crackled through the comms. We're being overrun. Extraction point is hot. Hill's blood ran cold. He sprinted back through the chaos, every breath burning. When he reached the extraction point, Vorash soldiers were fighting desperately. Renka was pinned down, plasma fire tearing through cover. Hill didn't think he just moved. He grabbed a nutrient bar from his belt, one modified to a lethal dosage, and hurled it at the Crux's attackers. It exploded on impact, releasing a blinding flash and a shockwave that sent the enemy reeling. Renka, now, Hill shouted, pulling the young soldier to his feet. Together, they fought their way back to the transport. Tyral appeared moments later, bloodied but alive. The warlord is dealt with. The transport lifted off, engines straining. Below them, chaos engulfed the Crux's forces. Soldiers stumbled, coordination shattered by the effects of Hill's rations. What had once been an impenetrable stronghold was now a maelstrom of confusion. Back in orbit, the Vorash fleet pressed their advantage. The Crux's fleet, disoriented and unable to regroup, fell one by one. The fortress world burned. On the bridge of the relentless intent, Tyral stood next to Hill, both of them battered but victorious. The Crux's defenses crumbled, their fleet routed. "It's over," Tyral said, disbelief mingling with relief. Almost Hill corrected, exhaustion etched into every word. "There's still cleanup." The Vorash warriors erupted in cheers, their voices echoing through the halls. For the first time in far too long, victory was theirs. Hours later, as the stars returned to their quiet watch over the war-torn system, Hill and Tyral stood alone on the observation deck. The silence was profound, broken only by the distant hum of engines. "You took our desperation and made it a weapon," Tyral said, his voice quiet, "and you showed us that hope can come from the strangest places." Hill nodded. "We did it together." Tyral extended a clawed hand. "To unlikely allies and to whatever comes next." Hill shook it firmly. "To the future." Together, they looked out at the stars, knowing that peace would not come easily, but that it was worth fighting for. And they would face whatever challenges lay ahead armed with hope, determination, and of course, an unlikely arsenal of emergency rations.